this is an opportunity for these companies to come out and say, we need to create a foundational layer of what's right and what's beneficial to the ecosystem to improve it for everybody.
Fact is that there's a lot of people who are leveraging your type of infrastructure, WordPress infrastructure, that are at the table and that are eager to try and raise the bar for everybody, or in some circumstances, highlight the good things that they're already doing.
Competition can be healthy. It can drive innovation. It can drive people to create unique solutions for things, but it doesn't have to be cutthroat.
There's a lot we could learn from each other if we sat down to learn the good stuff that we were each doing, so we could all use the best of it to make sure everybody was doing collective good on the internet.
Welcome to Impressive Hosting, where we seek to uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. I am Jesse Friedman, your host, and with me today is Christian from i2 Coalition. I wanted to have Christian on because not only is he doing some great work out there, but he and I have actually been working more together these days because we're both a part, or rather Christian founded, and now I am also a part of the Secure Hosting Alliance. Christian, thank you so much for coming on. Tell us about yourself.
Well, you also helped us bring the idea into reality. So I'll give you a little bit more credit for it than just sort of coming on after it was created. And we can tell a little bit of that story now, but it's great to work with you, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, i2 Coalition, which is behind all this stuff.
Well, I'm excited to be able to talk about hosting because I've been doing hosting for my entire career. My background is in web hosting. Before 13 years ago, I helped co-found this group, i2 Coalition, which stands for Internet Infrastructure Coalition, which was originally designed to help web hosts. And it eventually expanded so that it covered all of the internet's infrastructure, so a little bit broader. It's the whole hosting ecosystem, all the people that we collaborate with to make websites work. And so we've been running that for 13 years now. And then the Secure Hosting Alliance we'll get into, I'm sure, but that's the new project that I think is going to help take hosting to the next level.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was what intrigued me right away when you reached out about having Automatic join this new alliance, was this idea that we could bring hosts together for a common goal to help improve the internet, to help improve the way in which people gather data or browse the internet or whatever. And so there's a variety of ways in which i2 Coalition is bringing folks together. But the one that we're working on together most closely is the Secure Hosting Alliance. Why don't you tell me what made that? What was the genesis of it? Where did it come from?
Well, okay. So I don't know whether to give the short version or the long version. But
go for the long version, and I'll interrupt you when we get too far down the road.
That's cool. That's cool. So let me just start 13 years ago, just to give you a little bit of perspective on I2C and why we were founded, and then why this is a natural next step, even if it did take 13 years to get here. So like from my perspective, coming from a hosting company, and specifically a hosting company that was on the smaller side, we had like 60 employees. We built i2 Coalition in order to try and make sure that companies like ours could survive and thrive. And what we ended up doing, i2 Coalition's primary role now within the ecosystem is to teach legislators and regulators how our industry works so they don't do stupid stuff to mess it up. We have developed all these educational materials. We get involved directly with them when they're trying to work on and pass laws, and potentially try to do things that sort of change the way that we as providers can provide service. And so like we've built this thing and it's really successful, but it's only one possible way of us sort of bringing the community together to fight for things that help the industry grow. And it's really useful. It's one of the most important resources that I think exists in the internet ecosystem, in the hosting ecosystem. But we kind of realized that there's so much more that we can do with this collective voice and this collective gathering that we've built to try and make things better for everybody. And that if
Yeah.
instead of sort of focusing on educating people about what we're already doing, what if we got everybody together to do an internal check to make sure that the entire ecosystem is making the right decisions, and even to sort of align around what those those I don't want to use the word ethical behaviors because ethical is a loaded word, but those proper business behaviors are. What does it take to be a responsible? That's a good word. A
Yeah.
responsible hosting provider. What is it? What does that mean? What does the industry collectively think uh, is a responsible web hosting provider? What if we get together and we all decided that? And how could that help us raise the bar on how everybody's behaving in this space? So those are the kinds of things that we're going to explore with this new group.
There's a lot of areas you can cover in that if we're talking about being a responsible
Sure.
host. It's everything from your sales tactics to the way in which you secure customer websites to the tools and things that you bolt on, how much you're charging, the list goes
Yeah.
on. So where is your primary focus in helping to shape the responsibility there?
Well, so we've brought on a team that's being led by David Sneed. David Sneed is a lawyer in this space who's been in this industry for as long as I have. And David is guiding all the participants of this group in a discussion to outline exactly where the group wants to go, because it's driven by the people who are in there making the decision. I'm not choosing which of those things we're going to focus on. The group itself is deciding which ones we want to focus on. But what I can say is that I think that there's an interest in starting to talk about how we're dealing with and handling anti-abuse. I think that's an
Yeah.
early thing that we can sort of collectively talk about to make sure that we're all achieving some baseline that's making things better. From there, we'll see where the group goes, and we'll see how the group evolves as other hosting providers in this space take a look at what it is we're doing and say that they want to join and be a part of this initiative. They can help chart the trajectory of it themselves.
And so this podcast is primarily focused on WordPress, but this initiative is really for anyone, any hosting
Right.
company that's offering hosting solutions across static websites, open source, closed source, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I will say though that a significant portion of the hosting ecosystem these days is driven by, or certainly incorporates WordPress. And
Sure.
whether you're talking about how WordPress interfaces with anti-abuse or cybersecurity, or any sort of ethical behavior, it's all a part of the same ecosystem. The fact is that there's a lot of people who are leveraging your type of infrastructure, WordPress infrastructure, that are at the table and that are eager to try and raise the bar for everybody, or in some circumstances, highlight the good things that they're already doing. What we're finding in early
Right.
conversations is that for a lot of providers, it's less about trying to sort of raise the bar, but sort of trying to identify the good they're already doing and
Yeah.
outlining it in a way to try and sort of be a rising tide lifts all boats force for the rest of the industry.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. There's a lot of companies out there doing a lot of good things, and sometimes it just takes a solid voice to make people more aware of those opportunities to kind of mimic that or do the same thing. And one of the things, you mentioned the WordPress infrastructure, working on WP Cloud or Jetpack at Automatic. It's afforded me the ability to talk to a lot of hosting companies and to help them to understand that we, as members of an ecosystem, WordPress, and the companies that distribute that product, we can come together around similar goals, even though we're competing.
Yeah.
How has that been working with hosting companies when they may have competing objectives? They're trying very hard to work against each other, steal each other's customers. Like, do you feel like it is as aggressive as some people make it seem to be?
It's a great question. I think that one of the reasons why I2 Coalition has been successful for 13 years, when a lot of groups have come and gone, who have tried to sort of bring a team of rivals together to work collectively, is
Yeah.
that we've learned a little bit how to navigate those types of conversations.
Sure.
Um, we've tried to put some real firm guidelines around how people communicate in these groups. Tried to make sure that we listen to people about what it is they collectively need and try to sort of choose topics that everybody sort of agrees they want to work on. And then we manage the conversations in what we call a rough consensus manner. And rough consensus means that, like, most of the people need to be on board with the direction the conversation's going. You can have an outlier, and an outlier, one group that says, "Hey, I don't want to do that," can't throw off the entire progress of the entire group. But we're not going to pick directions that are like 60-40. We're not going to take
Hmm.
on issues that are really divisive, or we're not going to drag the industry forward kicking and screaming. And I think how that works and works well is that when we are working with potential members and we're talking to them about how we're really trying to raise the bar for the industry and do good things for the industry, we get a lot of companies who have good intentions within their own ecosystem. They still want their customers' business. They still want their competitors' business, right? But they also want their service to be good, to have high quality of service, stuff like that. So they've got good
Sure.
intentions. And we can bring them to the table and just say, hey, assume the best intentions in others. And we're going to work on projects in which a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
And, so come work with us collectively, and everybody's going to get more customers as a result. And a lot of
Yeah.
people buy into it.
Yeah.
I see
No,
a lot
that
of
makes
people.
total sense.
Now, let me say this, because we talked about how a lot of people are doing really good stuff in this industry. Not everybody is. There are lots of people who are um, less than well-intentioned in their offerings. They don't
Sure.
tend to be the ones that show up to engage in a group like I2 Coalition. But what's
Right.
interesting is, as we start to see outcomes from the Secure Hosting Alliance, as we start to put together a list of principles that come out of these types of conversations that we're having with all of these providers about what we see as responsible behavior in hosting, I think it's going to be easier to identify the types of companies that are below the bar that the industry decides to set. And it might be harder for the less ethical providers to continue to operate effectively after the
Yeah.
industry sort of said, we consider ethics to be sort of operations above this line.
Right. Well, you mentioned that there's a lot to work on, and so you're giving the hosting companies you're working with an opportunity to kind of really define where to work, and that's probably because there's enough to work on for quite a while. So
Yeah.
focusing on where their priorities are and motivations are is probably going to be helpful in moving that forward. It's not too
Yeah.
dissimilar than the conversations that we have when we're talking about partnering with hosts, which is that there's enough WordPress for everybody.
Yeah.
We don't need to be cutthroat competition. Competition can be healthy. It can drive innovation. It can drive people to create unique solutions for things, but it doesn't have to be cutthroat. So I think that one of the things to realize here too is that we have a responsibility to our customers, and hosting companies have a responsibility to the ecosystem. The same way that Pepsi and Coke could probably
Yeah.
get together around some regulations around the creation of aluminum cans, right? Because
Right.
if it starts making people sick, they're not going to just look at it as just Pepsi or just Coke. It's probably going to be soda as a whole is scary or going to cause a problem. So this is an opportunity for these companies to come out and say we need to create a foundational layer of what's right and what's beneficial to the ecosystem to improve it for everybody.
Yeah, and Pepsi and Coke all really benefit if they collectively get together and make it so that people are more comfortable going out and buying a soda. And
Exactly.
especially if they're working on making sure that, like, a small percentage of the soda isn't poison, things like that, it
Right.
makes a
Yeah. Yeah.
difference in making sure everybody's comfortable existing in
Yeah.
this ecosystem, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We think
Right.
we are, we think what we're doing is going to grow the market for everybody.
And so is the alliance working primarily in like the North American region? Is it global? Like, how are you defining your landscape?
So, um, the Secure Hosting Alliance operates as a division of the Internet Infrastructure Coalition. Internet infrastructure, and so I'm going to give the same answer for both organizations. The Internet Infrastructure Coalition and the Secure Hosting Alliance, their address, they're a United States-based business.
Yeah.
But the goal is to have global influence. We as an organization, when we work with, for instance, legislators and regulators in the I2C side of the house, we're actively working with legislators all over the world. We are talking with governments in Pakistan and India and France and Spain and Italy, and in Brussels and in Canada and the U.S. A lot of our infrastructure is in the U.S., but we try to go where we can be most helpful around the world. That being said, I would say most of our influence and most of our efforts center around our work in North America and some in Brussels, simply because the vast majority of our members are based there.
Sure.
Not
No,
not
but it's
not
great that
Brussels,
you're
but the EU. you know,
right, right,
Brussels.
right, right. When you talk about legislation, when I think of legislation that relates to the work that I do every day, the first things that come to mind in the past were like SOPA or net neutrality.
Sure.
What's top of mind for you right now? What's something that we need to be, thinking about?
Well, SOPA, you're talking about a story that's now 13 years old, and I mentioned
Sure.
that we
Yeah.
started 13 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so again, I'm going to answer in a kind of a long way, by saying that was our inciting incident and why we got together to
No
fight
kidding.
PIPA and SOPA. I was president of a web hosting company called Servant. We have since sold to LeaseWeb, but I was running my hosting company, and my co-founder David Sneed, who is now running the daily operations of the Secure Hosting Alliance. He came to me and we took a look at this, and we saw that SOPA and PIPA were going to be devastating to the web hosting industry. And we decided we needed to do something to try and address that. So we went down to Capitol Hill because I was based in Reston, Virginia. It was like, 45 minutes away. And we
Yeah.
sat down with Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. And he was putting a hold on this bill. And we were like, Senator Wyden, what can we do about this? We got to stop this. It's going to kill the hosting industry. What do we do? And he said, get more of you.
Yeah. Okay.
And so like, it was his idea to like, go ahead and have us sort of do a campaign. We ended up having a letter writer campaign against SOPA that was 200 hosting provider CEOs strong, something like that at the time.
Yeah.
It's a million years. It was so long ago.
Right.
And then we did all these sorts of big pushes on Capitol Hill, really helped influence the defeat of SOPA PIPA in a really real way.
Great.
And that was like the first thing that we did. And then we looked
Yeah.
around and we were like, this happened because people didn't understand what hosting was. Not because they wanted to kill hosting, but they didn't get it. They didn't know what it would do, right? And we were like,
Yeah.
oh, this is going to keep happening. They're going to keep on having this issue because what we do is largely invisible to most people unless somebody sits them down and tells them how it's going to work. So then our job became, okay, let's do this anytime that our industry is wrapped up into how legislation is affecting us. You're right that net neutrality is a big one, but the main mechanism that they were trying to mess with SOPA was Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which they sometimes call the I forget the 23 words that invented the internet. And it's just this simple concept that like you can touch the content of a user without being considered the publisher of that content, right?
Right.
And that was sort of made for us and a whole bunch of other sort of intermediary providers. Uh, and it's now a hot button issue again because of issues around content moderation, because people don't like what the social media companies do. So they want to tear
Right.
down Section 230. Well, Section 230 is still like the main mechanism within the United States for hosting providers to not get sued for the actions of their customers, right?
Right.
So
Right. And what we're not talking
we
about
need
here
it,
is like illegal content or
of
things that are
course.
bad, but it's the ability to have freedom of speech, to express yourself, to you go ahead.
You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. There is no defense of illegal activity. What I think that some these intermediary protections do is they allow hosting providers an environment in which they can be reactive to illegal content and not have to be proactive. You don't need to
Yeah.
scan the content of your users and make sure that you know
Right.
in advance what they're doing and to try to guess whether they're doing stuff that's illegal or not, right?
Yep.
And that's an important protection that we need to preserve.
Yeah. So I mean, in practice, that could look like having to WordPress.com or Bluehost or some other hosting company would have to review the content that you're publishing on your blog before you actually hit the publish button.
Yeah.
And think about the bottleneck that would create. And then how
Yeah.
would you actually put that into practice, right? You'd have to probably pay some additional fee to have
Right.
your content reviewed regularly, fast, whatever it might be, which is literally putting a choke on your ability to just have free speech on the internet.
Couldn't agree more. I also envision that should that happen, it's going to change the idea of who can be a host and who can't, because that's
Right.
something that would be difficult to do at scale. So a lot of the smaller providers would be pushed out. So like legislators, this is a key example because legislators who want to affect change on Section 230, they're thinking of how it will change things for Facebook and Meta or X or Google or Apple, right? They're not thinking of how it affects the small WordPress provider. But the small WordPress provider is probably the first to go if broad-based 230 reforms happen and we lose those kind of protections.
In our previous episode, we actually interviewed a company called Ivapix. They're a WP Cloud hosting company. They're a small group who are really trying to focus on building a wonderful user experience, and they leverage WP Cloud because it provides the infrastructure underneath everything for them so they can actually do more with less, right? They can have more people focused on that end user experience. But if they suddenly became responsible for approving and legally, responsible for the content of their customers' websites, beyond what we're talking about, like illegal stuff, things that no one wants on these websites, it would be they would immediately have to rethink everything. They would have to outsource that to some third party, some AI-driven tool or something along the lines that kind of mitigates their risk. But you're going to see the increased costs for that immediately in your websites, in your hosting.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And so it's hugely important. What we're doing is hugely important to be able to continue to support the small to medium businesses in the WordPress hosting space. That's who we're fighting for primarily, to be honest. And then let me transition real quickly to say, like, how Secure Hosting Alliance plays into that, because we've now been doing this with legislators for like 13 years. And we get listened to a certain extent. I mean, they don't know the information that we're providing to them. They're not looking necessarily to throw us under the bus. But after developing long-term relationships with lots of legislators and regulators, a lot of them are coming back now and saying, yeah, well, there's still a lot of bad that happens on the internet. And so what are you doing about it? Right.
Right.
And so then if industry wants to be responsible and industry wants to be in the driver's seat and not have legislators sort of propose bad ideas about how the rest of the problems that we're not taking care of get resolved, we should be putting our heads together to figure out whether we're doing the best stuff we could be doing to make a healthy ecosystem.
I like that. So you're approaching it from two angles, right? You're helping to inform the legislation. You're helping to inform the hosting companies around these things so that you can attack and defend our rights in that area. But you're also saying to the hosting companies, if you don't want a target on your back, if you don't want the attention of this legislation, you need to be doing something so that they don't have these concerns around the content that's being published on the internet. How do we work together to try and combat some of that?
That's right. Because we're not going to be effective long term just being the no guys with legislators.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, exactly.
we need to be solutions providers too, and industry should be solving problems online. And I think individual companies are. Individual companies are. The issue is that, like, the hosting companies aren't talking with one another, and that's fine. Like, hosting is it's a business where there's a lot of, we don't have any central regulator. And so there's sort of not been a lot of reason for us to come together as a community to talk. We don't want a central regulator. I think it'd be bad if there was some central regulator like there is for like the domain industry. So it's cool that we're fiercely independent for the most part.
Right.
But there's a limit to it, because there's a lot we could learn from each other if we sat down to learn the good stuff that we were each doing, so we could all use the best of it to make sure everybody was doing collective good on the internet.
Yeah, that's a great point. So when we talk about bringing hosts together, who is a part of the Secure Hosting Alliance, and also how do you get to hear more about this? How do you become a part of it? Do you have to, how do we bring more of these hosts in to understand how this is all working?
So that's a great question. So that I don't miss anybody, I'm pulling up the list that we launched with, which was just at the end of last month. So the companies
actually
that
self-serving real quick, you launched a website. Where is that hosted right now?
That website, that website is proudly hosted by WordPress, at WordPress by WordPress.
On
we are very excited.
Powered by WP Cloud. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yes.
I had to do that real quick.
Oh my God, we love working with you. It was the easiest thing in the world to collaborate with you, and it produced really good results. The specific website, just so people can go to it and see how awesome it is at hostingsecurity.net. So go there,
yeah.
hostingsecurity.net. And you're going to see a list of the launch hosting providers: GoDaddy, DreamHost, Cloudflare, Automatic, SiteGround, Newfold, Hostinger, WebPros, RackSmart, Recorded Future, Altus Host, Green Olive Tree, Black Knight Solutions, Patmos, SharkTech, CTM360, Abusix, IPXO, Name.com, 20i, Peta Express, Big Scoots, Xylo, and Two Cows. Just to start
that's a
out
good list
with.
Already. Yeah.
Just to start out with. Just to get us kick-started towards where we can eventually head.
That's amazing that you were able to bring those people together. So let me ask you this. If someone isn't involved in the actual alliance right now, but you need to start rallying some troops, how are you communicating with hosts that are outside of this, but maybe don't necessarily have the time or the means to be a part of the alliance, but they could still be a voice, they could still write a letter, they could still help out?
Sure. So that's a great question. We're working on a little bit of that. I2 Coalition has got a pretty good network of hosts that they speak with that aren't necessarily part of our membership. And when there is a need to really sort of raise the red flag, we can go wider than our standard membership. But we could really use the help of expanding our network. So we're doing some outreach to not just get new members, but make sure that we grow our ecosystem. So we want anybody, even if they're not necessarily immediately interested in joining a membership, because we are asking for financial contributions to become a member.
Sure.
We are investing time and resources and effort into building these things, and it takes money, right? So
of course you got to keep the lights on. You got to hire experts. You got to hire lawyers to decipher the law and to understand the legislation. Like, you're not going to just do this out of the back of your garage trying to figure out how to transform and improve the internet, right? Like, you need to have some support.
we are doing it out of the goodness of our hearts, but it takes that plus a list of resources that all have
Sure.
bottom line, you know,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
things that we need to, bills that we need to pay. So if you want to reach out to us, and even if you go on to hostingsecurity.net, you give us your name and email, you're on our list for updates, whether you end up deciding that you want to join and financially contribute and have your logo on as a participating member and join our monthly calls, and join our working groups in order to help drive forward what the principles will ultimately be coming out of this group. And one of the ways that we are trying to do outreach for this effort is we're going around to a bunch of trade shows, and we're going to be talking about the initiative and what it is we're trying to do there, and try to get people interested in helping us grow the network there. The first one is CloudFest, and we're going to have a launch party because we haven't all been together to go raise a glass and have fun together. And so the launch party is coming up in a couple of Mondays, and I can't wait.
I can't wait. I'm going to be there myself. But actually, let's take a quick break here and talk about CloudFest in our next episode. I think that we're having
Okay.
a great conversation, but we've already gone to 30 minutes, and I want to be thinking about how we can put this information out there in bite-sized formats. So,
Love it.
everyone at home, we're going to continue this great conversation with Christian, but we'll be back in our next episode. Thank you, Christian, for joining us today.
Thanks, Jesse. See you in part 2.
All right.